Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 181, First Spar as a Level 3. In the Loki Familia's training grounds, two figures moved at blinding speed, their forms reduced to little more than blurs as small shockwaves erupted in their wake. The sharp sound of steel clashing against steel rang through the air. Judas slipped past Ace's sword and retaliated with a swift kick, striking her squarely in the stomach. The impact sent her flying back dozens of meters, her feet carving deep trails into the ground before she managed to halt her momentum. This is much easier now, he thought as he immediately charged forward. After Tiona had insisted on having Urga enchanted and headed off into the dungeon, the meeting had concluded. Not long after, Ace approached him and requested a sparring match. Naturally, Judas didn't object. Having just reached level 3, he wanted to test his newfound strength, to see how he would fare against a combat prodigy like Ace. As a level 2, I could already somewhat compete against level 5s, now that I'm a level 3, just how much stronger have I become? The thought filled him with anticipation as he calmly parried Ace's sword strikes one after another, his expression far more relaxed compared to their previous fight. In contrast, Ace grit her teeth as she struggled to land even a single hit. Though she had yet to activate her magic or skill, she could no longer deny the harsh truth unfolding right in front of her. Judas, he's surpassed me. She had unleashed hundreds of slashes, strikes, and thrusts. Yet, not a single one of them connected, as Judas either blocked, deflected, dodged, or parried every attack with almost casual precision. Steel rang out again and again, there was no desperation in his movements, only efficiency. I think I've already adjusted to my new level 3 strength. The dissonance between my mind and body has disappeared. He had remained on the defensive for most of the fight, adapting to his newfound strength. Now it was time for him to strike. Judas slipped inside her guard, his palm brushing past the flat of her blade before striking her shoulder with a short, controlled blow. Ace was forced back, her boots skidding across the ground as she barely managed to keep her balance. She's fast, but I can see it all. As a result of his presence, and her training with Althea, Ace had definitely grown stronger. With most of her stats now reaching, or at least approaching, S rank and her combat ability far more refined, there was no doubt that if she were to face her former self from before she met Judas, she would have won 8 out of 10 times. As someone who possessed the bloodline of a spirit and an innate talent considered among the very best in the world of Danmachi, her growth was already remarkable when compared to her peers. However, Judas was something else entirely. Even more of a cheat than Belle, his rate of growth was something she could never hope to compete with in the first place. There was simply no comparison. But even so, the fire in her eyes, the determination to become stronger, had never waned. I refuse to be defeated so easily. Ace leapt back and immediately rushed forward again, her sword glowing faintly as she poured more strength into her strikes. The air howled as her blade cut through it, each slash faster and heavier than the last. Judas met them head-on. He twisted his wrist, redirecting the sword just enough for it to miss his neck by a hair's breadth, then stepped forward and struck the side of her blade with a sharp flick of his fingers. Clang! The impact numbed Ace's arm. Before she could recover, Judas swept her legs out from under her. She flipped backward on instinct, barely landing on her feet as she slid several meters away. Fighting the current Judas, it's like I am fighting against Finn, Riveria, or Gareth, Ace thought as her grip tightened around her sword. Now that Judas was a level 3, with his stats from his previous levels fully maxed out, the pressure he exuded was overwhelming. On top of that, there was his strengthening magic, which further boosted his overall combat ability. It was no wonder she had begun comparing him to the Loki Familia's top trio. There were very few adventurers in the city who could push her back like this. Now, Judas had become one of them. He had reached the realm of level 6. After fighting him for several minutes, she was confident in that assessment. She took a slow breath and lowered her stance. "I'm not done yet." At those words, a familiar pressure began to rise around her. Tempest. Wind stirred at her feet, swirling in erratic currents as her magic responded to her will. Judas' eyes sharpened. "So you're bringing it out," he said quietly. Ace stepped forward, and the wind exploded around her as she activated her magic. In an instant, she vanished, reappearing right in front of him, her sword descending in a strike fast enough to split the air itself. Boom! The ground cracked beneath them as Judas blocked the blow with his forearm, magic reinforcing his body at the moment of impact. The shockwave rippled outward, kicking up dust and forcing the spectators at the edge of the training ground to shield their eyes. Using the momentum she had built up, Ace swung her sword relentlessly. Judas met her head-on, fighting back with his metal gauntlets as the two exchanged rapid blows. Each clash sent shockwaves rippling outward, dust erupting into the air and obscuring half the battlefield. Judas' expression tightened. Because of the sword's superior reach, he realized he was being pushed back, if only slightly. With Ace Wind acting as both shield and weapon, landing a clean hit on her was far more difficult than he had anticipated. Its offensive power and defensive capabilities were simply top-notch. Even among magic users, her wind was abnormal. Something every first-class adventurer who had witnessed her fight readily acknowledged. It granted her a boost great enough to temporarily place her on par with a level 6. Should I try to take control of her wind like last time? The thought crossed his mind before he shook his head. No. That would defeat the purpose of testing the strength I gained as a level 3. Which was why he made his decision. I guess it's time to go all out. With that thought, Judas exhaled slowly. Good. This is exactly the kind of pressure I wanted, he said, a faint smile forming. Body reinforcement. Full power. In the next heartbeat, he vanished from her sight. Before Ace could react, a hand struck her sword arm, knocking her weapon aside, while a second blow, stopped just short of her chest, froze her in place. The wind around her dissipated. The match was over. Ace stood there, sword trembling in her grip, staring at Judas, who had already withdrawn his hand. I lost, she said quietly. Judas lowered his stance and nodded. But you're strong, he replied honestly. Stronger than you were last time. Judas didn't say these words out of consolation, he truly did think she had gotten stronger. He's improving at such a rapid pace, can I even? Ace felt her chest tighten even more as she stared back at him, realizing just how far ahead he had gone. Chapter 182, Receiving Head Pats from Astria. Judas. That's not true, you have gotten so much stronger in such a short time. Ace spoke quietly as she touched both the tips of her index fingers together. Compared to me. I. Ace stuttered as if hesitation to continue her words. Seeing her increasingly growing despondent expression, Judas lightly exhaled through his nose and put his hand over his shoulder. Ace. Judas' voice was low and steady. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, warm and reassuring, anchoring her before her thoughts could spiral any further. She stiffened at first, then slowly relaxed, her gaze falling to the floor as her fingers fidgeted even more tightly. Since you're not far off from becoming a level 6, you were planning to head into the dungeon and challenge the Udius Monster Rex, weren't you? Hearing his words, her eyes widened in surprise. How did you know? She asked. I know because I watched the anime. Judas scratched the side of his head, but he knew he couldn't exactly say that. Just a hunch, he replied with a shrug. You're not going to stop me? She asked, peering into his eyes as if trying to see through his thoughts. Stop you? Judas repeated. Well, fighting the Udius by yourself is dangerous, and the general advice I'd give is to stay clear of it and not take the risk. His words caused Ace's shoulders to slump slightly, guilt flickering across her expression. Call me crazy, but if there's someone who can pull off that feat, it's you. He continued, letting out a small breath. I know because you succeeded in the original show. Well, I really shouldn't be saying this, Judas added. But to rank up at your level, you need to take some amount of risk to reach the next step. He paused before meeting her gaze again. Just remember, you don't have to do everything alone. We're a familia. We look out for each other. At that, Ace's expression visibly brightened. Then, she spoke hesitantly. When I eventually go to fight the Idias, will you come with me? She looked at him shyly as she asked. Well. Judas trailed off when he noticed Ace staring at him with unmistakable puppy eyes, prompting him to sigh. I guess I can make time. At that, Ace lifted her hand and raised her pinky. I heard from Loki that if you wrap your pinky fingers together. Ace continued, her voice quiet but earnest. It means you won't break your promise. Judas blinked, then let out a small, helpless chuckle. A pinky promise, huh? Ace nodded once, still holding her pinky up, her expression serious in that uniquely straightforward way of hers, as if this were an ancient rite rather than a childish gesture. I guess I don't have much choice. Their fingers locked together as a warm breeze passed through them, causing their hair to sway. Ace, I want you to keep this in mind. Judas' voice was calm, but there was a quiet weight behind it. I know this sounds ridiculous when I am the one saying it. He shifted his gaze slightly, as if choosing his words carefully. But don't ever compare yourself to others. The person that you need to surpass is the past version of yourself. The words lingered. Slowly, Ace lifted her head. Golden eyes met purple ones, clear, unwavering. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. In those seconds, Ace searched his gaze, as though trying to determine whether he truly believed what he was saying. She found no hesitation. A faint smile touched her lips, small, but genuine. Judas, thank you. She said softly, her voice steadier than before. The uncertainty that had clouded her expression moments ago had thinned, replaced by something quieter, but stronger. Seeing that change, Judas felt his own expression soften. He smiled back, just as faintly. Anytime, he replied. And for once, neither of them felt the need to say anything more. Just as they finished up, their ears perked up when someone approached them with hurried steps. When both Judas and Ace turned their heads, they saw Lafia walking toward them, bottles of water and towels in hand. You guys were amazing, like always. Lafia said, her eyes sparkling dreamily. Ah. It's not much, but here. You must have been dehydrated after training, right? She added as she handed them the items. Oh, thanks, Lafia. Judas said as he took the bottle of water from her hands and drank from it. Lafia, thanks. Ace also expressed her gratitude before taking a drink. No problem. Hearing both of them, Lafia's face brightened as she drifted off into La La Land, her eyes growing cloudy as imaginary roses and rainbows seemed to flutter around her. Is she all right? Judas thought as he glanced in her direction before wiping himself down with a towel. Several hours passed quietly as Judas sat cross-legged in the training grounds, his attention fully devoted to the slow, deliberate repair of his damaged mana core. The repair progress is now at 45%. Judas muttered to himself as he looked inward, seeing the once fractured mana core slowly mending itself. He rose to his feet and brushed the dust off himself. The time to meet up with Ace should be around a few hours. I guess I'll eat out in the meantime, he thought before walking off. The streets of Ororio were lively as ever. Vendors shouted over one another, the aroma of freshly cooked food mingling with the hum of conversation and clanking armor. Judas drifted naturally toward a cluster of food stalls, ordering a few skewers and a warm pastry before leaning against a nearby post as he ate. Oh? Is that you, Judas? It's been quite some time. The gentle, familiar voice made him pause mid-bite. Turning his head, Judas spotted Astria approaching, her expression soft and warm as ever, the evening light catching in her hair. Goddess Astria, I didn't think I'd see you out here, he greeted after swallowing his food. She chuckled lightly. Orario is a small place when you least expect it to be. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment before brightening. I heard you've already ranked up to level 3. Congratulations, Astrea said warmly. Before Judas could respond, she reached out and patted his head. Judas froze for half a second, then relaxed, offering a small, awkward smile but making no move to stop her. If it had been Loki, he would have swatted the hand away without hesitation. But Astrea's touch carried no mischief, only gentle affection, the kind that reminded him uncomfortably of something he hadn't realized he missed. Seeing his reaction, Astrea quickly withdrew her hand. My apologies, I visit the local orphanage quite often. I suppose I've grown too used to patting children on the head without thinking, she said, looking slightly embarrassed. Don't worry, Lady Astrea, Judas replied calmly. There was no harm done. She visibly relaxed at that, her smile returning. If Loki were here, she would have angrily accused Judas of unfair treatment. I'm glad, she said, then tilted her head slightly, a hint of teasing entering her voice. Though, if you ever want more head pats, I could always oblige. Judas coughed lightly into his fist. Ahem, right. Chapter 183, Maria's Orphanage. Right, Judas, will you accompany this goddess on a little trip to Maria Orphanage? Astrea asked with a gentle smile. As you know, Orario has not been a safe place lately, with all kinds of incidents popping up left and right over the past month. Astrea continued, her tone calm despite the words. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, a faint glimmer of amusement there. You can think of it as an escort mission, where the brave knight guards the fair lady on her little trip, she added lightly. Judas paused, then let out a dry chuckle. You want me to accompany you to visit the orphanage? Astrea nodded in confirmation. I promised the children that I would visit today. It would be nice to have some help, and some company. Judas glanced down the street, then nodded. All right. If it's an escort mission, I'll see it through properly. Astrea's smile brightened. I'm glad. The children are quite fond of visitors, especially those who look strong but kind. That's a very specific description, Judas said, rubbing the back of his neck. It fits you well, she replied without missing a beat. I'll take your word for it. Judas coughed lightly. As they began walking, Astrea clasped her hands behind her back, her steps light. You've changed, she said softly. Judas glanced at her. There's less weight in your eyes than before. Still there, but lighter, Astrea continued as she clasped her hands together. Judas was quiet for a moment. I've had good people around me lately. Astrea smiled, satisfied. That, too, is a form of justice. Her gaze lingered on him for a brief moment, her expression thoughtful, almost proud, before she turned her attention back to the road. I think the children will like you very much, Astrea said with a gentle voice, looking ahead, then her froze as her eyes widened in realization. Right, before that. I forgot to buy a couple of gifts for the children, Astrea muttered, pausing slightly. Judas blinked, then turned toward her. You really don't miss a thing, do you? Astrea let out a soft laugh. They always look forward to it. Even something small is enough to make their day brighter. Judas glanced toward the nearby stalls lining the street. Then let's not keep them waiting. What do they usually like? Simple things, toys they can share, sweets they can pass around. Nothing extravagant, Astrea replied as she began walking again. Sounds manageable, Judas said, following her lead. They stopped by a modest vendor, wooden toys and colorful trinkets neatly arranged on the counter. Astrea browsed quietly, selecting a few items with careful thought, while Judas added a couple more, sturdy, harmless things that wouldn't break easily in small hands. They even brought some snacks that they think the children would enjoy. As Astrea thanked the vendor, she turned to Judas with a warm smile. Thank you for coming along. The children always feel safer when there are kind people around. Judas scratched the back of his head. I don't know about kind, but I don't mind, Goddess Astrea. Astrea's smile softened, as if she understood more than he let on. Also, Judas, you can just call me Astrea. The way you address me is a little too formal. She added gently. Is that all right? Judas paused mid-step. I am. But right now, I'm simply accompanying a gentleman to visit some children. Astrea smiled, unbothered. He considered that for a moment, then let out a quiet breath. All right. Astrea, he said, testing the name. Much better. Her smile widened, pleased. After walking for a few minutes, they had finally arrived. Look! Look! It's Lady Astrea. She's here. She's here. The kind goddess is back. Yay! Lady Astrea. Play with me. Play with me. Childish voices rang out one after another as a crowd of small children came running toward them, their faces lit up with unrestrained joy. Oh my! Did everyone miss me? Astrea said warmly as she crouched down, opening her arms before gently patting their heads one by one. Of course we did. You promised you'd come back. Did you bring stories this time? Their excited chatter overlapped as they clung to her sleeves, some hugging her waist while others tried to get her attention by tugging on her dress. A soft laugh escaped Astrea's lips. Now, everyone, one at a time. I haven't gone anywhere, she said with a gentle voice. And yes, I brought gifts as well. At those words, the children's eyes sparkled even brighter. Gifts? Really? Standing a short distance away, Judas watched the scene unfold in silence, both arms occupied by the bags of goods they had just bought. One of the children finally noticed him and tilted her head. Who's that? Her innocent question drew several curious gazes toward Judas. Judas diverted his attention toward her as well. A beastkin girl with cream-colored hair. Her name must be Fina, right? Astrea looked back at him and smiled. This is Judas. He's the one who helped me carry all those presents. You should thank him properly. The children's eyes widened. Whoa! He looks strong. Mister! Are you an adventurer? Judas stiffened slightly, then let out a small, awkward chuckle. Well, yeah. Before he could say more, a small pair of hands tugged at the hem of his coat. Thank you, mister. Yeah. You're welcome. Despite himself, Judas felt his shoulders relax. This person who came with the kind goddess, he feels strangely familiar. A brown-haired human boy slowed to a stop, his gaze lingering on Judas with open curiosity. Judas met his stare and quickly recognized him. Rai, one of the children from Maria's orphanage. He watched as the boy's brows knit together, his expression shifting little by little, as though he were rummaging through his memories. Then, a second later, realization struck. Rai's eyes widened, and he suddenly pointed straight at Judas. Ah! I remember now. Why, you're that famous record holder, the guy who leveled up to level 3 in just 1 month. His voice wavered with excitement as the words tumbled out. Why, you're Judas Spade, right? Despite the stammer, the unmistakable sparkle in his eyes betrayed his awe. Rai, the rough-looking human boy, stepped closer, staring up at him with pure, unfiltered admiration. That's enough, everyone. The voice was calm, warm, and firm. A woman stepped into view, her dark hair tied neatly back, a gentle smile on her face. You're all crowding Lady Astrea again. Have you already forgotten your manners? She said lightly. The children exchanged glances. Sorry. We just got excited. She came back. I know, but you should make sure not to overwhelm our guest. Maria replied, crouching down to their level. She gently adjusted a collar here, brushed dust off a knee there. It's all right, Maria. I don't mind at all. Seeing them so lively makes me happy. Maria turned to her and dipped her head respectfully. Even so, Lady Astrea, you're still a guest. And you as well. She added, shifting her gaze to Judas. Judas Spade, thank you for escorting Lady Astrea here. And for indulging the children. It's nothing. They're good kids. Judas returned with a light smile. Chapter 184, The Return. Joyous laughter rang all around. Judas turned his head, watching a group of children run across the yard, clutching the new toys he and Astrea had given them. Their laughter was loud and unrestrained, the kind that made the air itself feel lighter. He shifted his gaze to the side. Beneath the shade of a nearby tree, Astrea was playing patty cake with a few of the younger children, her movements gentle, her smile warm and sincere. For a goddess, she looked perfectly at home there. Leaning back against a wall, Judas relaxed. Only for a familiar figure to approach. Rai stopped a few steps in front of him, staring up with eyes filled with unmistakable admiration. Mr. Judas? Yeah. Judas replied. Rai clenched his fists at his sides, his eyes shining. Someday. I want to be strong like you. Judas paused. He pushed himself off the wall and lowered himself slightly so they were closer to eye level. After a brief moment, he gave a small nod. You want to become an adventurer? Rai's face immediately broke into a wide grin. Yeah. I want to be an adventurer so I can support the orphanage and protect everyone. He lightly pounded his chest as he spoke, brimming with pride. That's a good goal. Just make sure you don't forget it. Judas said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I won't. Rai answered without hesitation, before dashing off to rejoin the others. You Mr. Adventurer. A shy, hesitant voice reached Judas's ears. He turned and saw Rue, the half-elf child with blonde hair, standing a short distance away and fidgeting nervously. What is it, Rue? Judas asked, raising a brow slightly. Do you know any magic? Rue asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Magic? Judas tilted his head. Well, I can use a little. Really? Rue's face immediately lit up. Then, can you show me? I want to see magic. Hearing the exchange, Astrea glanced over and smiled. What a wonderful idea, she said gently. I suppose I forgot you were a mage, Judas. You don't quite look like one. She turned toward him with a warm, motherly smile. You wouldn't mind giving the children a small demonstration, would you? That was all it took. Mr. Adventurer is going to use magic? I wanna see. I wanna see. Magic. Magic. Yay. The children quickly gathered around him, their excitement bubbling over as they crowded closer. Judas looked around at their eager faces and let out a helpless chuckle. Looks like there's no stopping them once they get like this. From the side, Maria sighed, pressing a palm to her cheek. Oh dear. Just don't rile them up too much. She said with mild exasperation, though the fondness in her eyes was impossible to miss. I'll try. Judas replied dryly with a wry smile. He stepped forward, gently raising a hand. All right. Settle down a bit. The children quieted, not completely, but enough, forming a loose semicircle around him. Rue stood right at the front, hands clasped together, eyes practically sparkling. Let's see, what should I do? Judas thought in his mind as he tapped his chin, making a decision. I could try that. He stretched out his arm and summoned a magic circle on the ground. Seeing this, the children let out exclamations of awe and fascination. Even Maria couldn't but stare curiously, her eyes glued to the magic circle rotating on the ground. Wah! It's pretty. Ooh! It's glowing. So this is magic. After all, magic was a rare sight for ordinary people like them. Such reactions coming from them was expected. After a few seconds, the earth suddenly wriggled and rose from the ground before forming into a human-like shape. Ah, it looks like Ru. One of the children pointed out as an earth statue with the appearance similar to that of Ru appeared in front of them holding a gold-colored flower. That is, me? Ru's eyes widened. It even has your hair. And the flower's pretty. The earthen figure tilted slightly, as if bowing, the golden flower held carefully in its hands. Judas crouched down and tapped the statue lightly with his knuckle. It responded by straightening up and lifting the flower toward Ru. Go on, Judas said. It's for you. Ru hesitated, then slowly stepped forward. Thank you. Ru whispered, before breaking into a shy smile. Astrea covered her mouth softly, clearly touched. How lovely. She murmured with a gentle smile. Yes, it is beautiful. Maria nodded in agreement. At that moment, Judas snapped his fingers. The earth figure crumbled gently, dissolving back into the ground like sand carried away by the wind, leaving the golden flower behind. Whoa! It disappeared. Can you make another one? How about a monster? Not a monster. Maria said immediately, clearing her throat. Judas raised both hands in surrender. No monsters. But... He drew another small circle in the air this time. Several glowing orbs emerged, drifting lazily before shaping themselves into tiny animals, a hopping rabbit, a fluttering bird, a clumsy little turtle crawling across the dirt. The children gasped, then burst into delighted laughter as they followed the creatures around the yard. Hey! It's running! Wait for me! It's so cute! Ru watched with awe. Mr. Judas. Ru said softly. Magic is amazing. Judas glanced down at the half-elf child, then at the children chasing after the glowing animals. Yeah, it can be. He said quietly. From beneath the tree, Astrea watched him with gentle eyes, a small, knowing smile on her lips, one that spoke of gratitude, and perhaps something deeper. For just a little while longer, the orphanage was filled with nothing but laughter, light, and warmth. Thank you very much, Lady Astrea, Mr. Judas, for giving the children such a wonderful time. Maria said with a deep bow, her voice filled with sincere gratitude. Beside her, the children gathered in a small crowd, some still clutching their new toys, others holding onto the glowing flower or replaying the magic they had just witnessed in their imaginations. Thank you, Lady Astrea. Thank you, Mr. Judas. That magic was awesome. Come play again next time. Their voices overlapped in a chorus of cheerful farewells. Astrea laughed softly and knelt down once more, gently patting a few heads. I promise. I'll come visit again. She said warmly. Judas gave an awkward wave, a faint smile lingering on his face as he looked at the children. After a few more seconds of exchanging goodbyes, Judas and Astrea finally turned away from the orphanage, walking side by side along the sunlit streets. Behind them, the children continued waving until they were out of sight. Astrea clasped her hands in front of her, her steps light. Her gaze shifted toward him, carrying quiet sincerity. Thank you for coming with me today. Judas met her eyes for a moment, then looked away. Yeah. That was fun. They continued walking, the orphanage now far behind them. Neither of them noticed, however, the subtle shift in the air, nor the murmurs beginning to ripple through the nearby streets, voices growing louder with each passing step. The murmurs gradually grew clearer as they moved farther down the street. Did you hear? Whispers rippled through the crowd, carrying an unmistakable air of excitement. Then, a single declaration rose above the rest, sharp and unmistakable, instantly capturing their attention. The Astrea Familia. The Familia of Justice has returned from their expedition. Chapter 185, Elisa's attempt at teasing fails. In the main street leading to the Tower of Babel, a massive crowd had gathered, their faces brimming with excitement. They were here for one reason alone, to witness the return of the Astrea Familia from their expedition. Oh! Look! They're here! The Ladies of Justice. Is that Scarlet Harnell at the front? This is my first time seeing them, they're just as beautiful as the rumors say. Kaguya-sama. I came all the way from the Far East just to see you at least once. Surrounded by cheers and admiration, Elise couldn't help but puff out her chest proudly. Hee hee, look at all these people. They're practically here just to see me, she said with a smug grin. Ugh. I can't wait to finally sleep in a real bed. It's been way too long. Lyra groaned, stretching her arms with a thoroughly exhausted expression. Speaking of rest, I'm looking forward to soaking in a hot spring. I can finally sit down and relax. Kaguya added calmly, her eyes closed. Still basking in the crowd's attention, Elise turned toward one of the lower-ranked members. Hey! Wave the flag properly, she ordered. Let everyone know that we, the proud Knights of Justice, have returned. The member holding the banner gave a wry smile, well aware of their captain's fondness for showmanship. Even so, she lifted the flag high and waved it proudly. Satisfied, Elise nodded before drawing her sword and pointing it skyward. The crowd erupted even louder. Despite the scratches on their armor and the rough state they were in after delving deep into the dungeon, the brilliance and beauty of the Astrea Familia had not diminished in the slightest. Welcome back, Elise, everyone. The familiar feminine voice cut through the noise like a gentle bell. For a brief moment, the Astrea Familia froze. Then, almost in unison, they turned their heads. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a clear path as Astrea walked toward them, her presence calm yet unmistakable, a soft, motherly smile resting on her lips. Just a step behind her was Judas, hands tucked into his coat. Goddess. Elise was the first to react, her eyes widening slightly before lighting up. I am proud to say that we are back from the expedition, safe and sound. Although there were some injuries, thankfully, there were no casualties. She added with a wide smile that showed off her white teeth. That is good to hear. Astrea said before pausing, her gentle gaze sweeping over her children. Everyone, all of you did great. Astrea said as her eyes curved into a crescent moon. The words of their goddess caused every member of the Astrea Familia to smile, their hearts feeling lighter, as if they had been praised by their own mother. All the fatigue and exhaustion from the long dungeon dive seemed to melt away, washed clean by her presence alone. Thank you for your kind words, Lady Astrea. Kaguya said respectfully. To receive praise from our goddess, even facing the dangers of the dungeon, it's worth it. Elise added, before her gaze shifted to the boy standing behind her. Judas, did you miss me that badly that you came running the moment you heard about my glorious return? Elise said as she flicked her hair aside, a teasing grin on her lips. Oh. Judas replied, arms crossed. And what would you do if I said that was the case? At that, Elise visibly flinched, a hint of red blooming across her cheeks. Ah ha ha. Is that so? I suppose it would be natural for you to yearn for a beautiful girl like me, she said, stammering as she hastily turned her gaze away. All right? Her voice trailed off, far less confident than it had been moments ago. Captain, not gonna lie, that was really weak sauce coming from you, Lyra commented, shaking her head. Kaguya opened one eye, clearly struggling to keep her composure. Though she tried to remain stoic, the faint twitch at the corner of her lips betrayed her amusement. Hey, Kaguya. I can see you trying to hold back your laugh. Elise snapped indignantly. Judas, meanwhile, tilted his head. You're the one who brought it up. I just answered honestly, he added with a shrug. After all, it was technically the truth. He really had come here after hearing that they'd returned from their expedition. Elise's face burned an even deeper shade of red. That's not fair. Elise protested as she spun back toward him. You're not supposed to agree so casually. A few chuckles rippled through the Astrea Familia. Heh, she walked right into that one, Lyra muttered with a grin. Even the other members of the Astrea Familia began whispering among themselves. Wow. I've never seen the captain this flustered before. Right? To think the always positive, confident, free-spirited, prideful captain could be reduced to this with just a few words, that Judas, do you think the captain? The sentence trailed off, but everyone present understood the implication. Hey! What are you guys implying? Elise snapped, pointing at them with her index finger. While all of this was happening, Kaguya stepped closer to Judas, her gaze slowly moving over him from head to toe. You seem stronger than before, she said, her dark pink eyes boring into him. Judas wasn't surprised that Kaguya had noticed. When someone ranked up, the change wasn't always visible on the surface, but the presence they carried, the weight of their existence, became sharper, denser. To a seasoned adventurer like her, it was impossible to miss. Did you recover your original strength? Kaguya asked. Judas shook his head. I reached level 3 while you were away, he replied calmly. Kaguya nodded at first, then froze. Her eyes snapped open a heartbeat later as the words finally registered. Level 3? She repeated, blinking several times. Did I hear that right? You're a level 3 now? Lyra chimed in, staring at him as if he were some kind of anomaly. Well, if it's you, I suppose that's only natural, Kaguya said after a brief pause, quickly regaining her composure. None of them even considered the possibility that he was lying. They accepted his words without hesitation. Because unlike their captain, Judas wasn't the type to boast or exaggerate about himself. Chapter 186, Visiting a Smith. Kaguya stared at Judas, a clear battle intent burning in her eyes. What's with that look? Judas caught it immediately and questioned her. It's nothing, Kaguya replied calmly. I just feel an itch to have a sparring match with you. Oh? Are you sure? I should warn you, this time, it won't end like last time, Judas said, matching her tone. Kaguya scoffed softly, a faint grin tugging at her lips. You mean when you were ruthlessly humiliated by me? Well, you've got me there. No excuses, Judas admitted, unfazed. He paused, lifting his gaze until it met hers directly. But that was before. Judas' lips curved into a faint, confident smile as he straightened, the lazy air around him subtly shifting. Kaguya felt it instantly. Ho! Her instincts screamed, the warrior's sense honed by countless battles sharpening all at once. The Judas standing in front of her was still the same boy, but the space around him felt heavier, tighter, like a drawn blade that hadn't been unsheathed yet. Elise noticed it too. Oi, boy. She leaned forward, squinting. That look on his face. Don't tell me you're actually serious? Lyra let out a low whistle. Yeah, the atmosphere had suddenly took a turn, she said as she slowly took a few steps back. Kaguya's eyes gleamed brighter, excitement replacing her earlier teasing. Good. That just makes this more interesting, she said, voice calm but eager. She placed a hand on the hilt of her katana, not drawing it, but resting there, a clear statement of intent. Judas narrowed his eyes and slowly took a battle stance. A beat of silence followed. Then, Wait. Elise threw herself between them, arms spread wide. No sparring. Not here. Not now, she barked, glaring at both of them. Do you have any idea how much paperwork Astria-sama will dump on me if you two turn the main street into a battlefield? Besides, we just got back from an expedition. You're nowhere near 100%, Kaguya. Don't act tough in front of your captain. As if on cue, Astria cleared her throat softly. The mere sound was enough to extinguish the tension like water over flame. Kaguya clicked her tongue quietly, relaxing her stance. Another time, then. She met Judas' gaze one last time, her smile sharp and sincere. I'll look forward to it. Judas nodded. So will I. As the moment passed, the surrounding members exhaled as if they'd been holding their breath. Geez, that was scary. I really thought they were going to start swinging for a second there. As expected of the captain. Diffusing the situation that quickly. The murmurs spread through the Astrea Familia as several members wiped the cold sweat from their brows. Oh, right. Judas spoke up casually. I almost forgot to ask, did you guys take out Eudias on the 37th floor? Elise slowly turned toward him. The look on her face said everything. Are you serious right now? She let out a long sigh and rubbed her temple. You almost start a fight in the middle of the main street, and that's the first thing you ask? She muttered under her breath, shaking her head. Still, she answered. No. We didn't. When we reached the 37th floor, and again when we climbed back up, it hadn't spawned. She paused. Then her brows slowly knit together. Wait. Her gaze snapped back to Judas, suspicion creeping into her expression. Her eyes slid back to Judas, sharp and assessing. Why do you ask? Judas hummed thoughtfully. Just curious. He said with a nonchalant shrug. You didn't happen to be thinking of fighting it alone, did you? Lyra squinted at him. Well, not really, but you are not far off either. Judas said, choosing not to elaborate further. Oi. You're insane. Elise jabbed a finger into his chest. Certified. Lyra nodded solemnly. Astrea watched the exchange with gentle eyes, a soft, melodic laugh escaping her lips. It seems you've all kept your spirits. I'm glad. She said softly, her voice carrying an almost soothing warmth. She stepped forward once more, placing herself at the center of her familia. Come. You must all be exhausted. Let us return home. Astrea continued, her smile gentle yet resolute. At those words, a collective sigh of relief swept through the Astrea Familia, shoulders loosening as if the last remnants of tension finally slipped away. Yes, please. I'm running purely on stubbornness at this point. Lyra said at once, rubbing the back of her neck with a tired groan. A bath sounds like paradise right about now. Kagaya added, nodding in firm agreement. All right. Let's go, team. Elise declared, clapping her hands together as her usual high spirits snapped back into place. We march, back to the Stardust Garden. The familiar name seemed to energize everyone, a few of the lower members even straightening their backs as if responding to a rallying cry. Elise took a step forward, then paused. Her eyes slid sideways toward Judas. You're coming with us, right? She asked, her voice casual, but just a little too quick, as if she were trying not to care. Judas met her gaze, silent for a moment, before giving a small shake of his head. I'd love to. He replied honestly. But I have some business to attend to. Elise studied his face for a brief second, then nodded, understanding settling in without complaint. Then take care, Judas. She said with a gentle voice, her smile unchanged. Judas inclined his head slightly in response. Watching their departing backs shrinking into the distance, Judas turned around and walked into another direction. The rhythmic clang of hammers striking steel echoed through the air. The moment Judas stepped into the district, a wave of heat washed over him, heavy and suffocating. Furnaces roared on every side, their flames painting the area in shades of orange and red. Wherever he looked, blacksmiths were hard at work, some hunched over anvils, sparks bursting with every strike, others displaying freshly forged weapons and armor to passing customers. And yet, none of it held Judas' attention. Without slowing his pace, he moved with clear purpose, heading straight for his destination. The moment he pushed open the door and stepped inside, he spoke calmly. Miss Tsubaki, I'm here to pick up my stuff. Judas had arrived at Tsubaki's shop. From deeper within the workshop, the sound of a hammer striking steel came to a halt, replaced by the low hiss of steam. A second later, heavy footsteps approached. A familiar, laid-back voice answered from behind a curtain of hanging tools and half-finished blades. Oh. You're earlier than I expected. The curtain was pushed aside, revealing Tsubaki Kalbrand herself. Her black hair was tied back messily, a few strands clinging to her sweat-dampened neck. A leather apron hung over her broad frame, scorched and worn from countless hours at the forge. She wiped her hands on a cloth, her right eye sweeping over Judas from head to toe. Chapter 187. Personal Blacksmith Contract. You know, you really are something else, Tsubaki said with a crooked, sarcastic grin. To have the best blacksmith in Orario, aside from Lady Hephaestus and Lord Gognia, maintaining your weapon instead of forging you a new one. I'm honestly at a loss for words. Well, you were the one who approached me and offered your services in the first place, Judas replied calmly as he met her gaze. Ha! Fair enough. She chuckled as she stepped closer, prompting Judas to raise a brow. I'll admit, being the smith for the record holder who reached level 3 in a single month was one of the reasons I sought you out. Her grin widened. But that's not the only reason. Before he could even process her words, Tsubaki suddenly spread her arms and pulled him into a tight embrace in the blink of an eye. Eh? Judas let out a dumbfounded sound as his face was abruptly buried against a pair of very soft, very dangerous mountains. As I thought, Tsubaki exclaimed, squeezing him even tighter. You're absolutely adorable. When I first laid eyes on you, I've wanted to do this for ages. She swayed from side to side, looking thoroughly pleased with herself. Ah, fuck. She's strong. I'm actually getting crushed. Judas felt an alarming creak run through his bones. Deciding this was a battle he could not win through conventional means, his body dissolved into mist, slipping effortlessly from her grasp. Whoa! Tsubaki blinked, eyes widening as he reformed a few steps away. You can do that? And without a chant? Tsubaki, Judas said flatly, straightening himself. Have you ever heard of personal space? Nope. She answered instantly, her expression utterly shameless. Judas exhaled quietly, straightening his coat and shooting her a flat look. You know, this is harassment. Correction. Tsubaki said, raising a finger. This is the blacksmith's privilege. Before he could retort, she turned on her heel and gestured toward the back of the shop. Come on. Enough playing around. Her expression shifted, still playful, but now tinged with pride as she quickly shifted the topic without batting an eye. Judas merely sighed, deciding not to pursue the matter further, and followed her. Your jarned loafer has been waiting. Tsubaki spoke as she reached for a cloth-wrapped item and handed it to him. And after the abuse you've put it through with whatever ridiculous adventures you've been on. She smirked. I made sure it's in perfect condition. Judas accepted the weapon, the familiar weight settling naturally into his palm as if it belonged there. I didn't add anything new, aside from applying the Durandal attribute like you requested. She continued, jabbing a thumb in his direction. I also reinforced what was already there, making sure it can handle a bit more output than before. Judas nodded and slipped the armored glove on without hesitation. The moment he poured magic into it, the jarned loafer responded instantly. A faint radiance spread across its surface, and the embedded magic stones shimmered softly, as if acknowledging their master once more. Ha, looks like you're satisfied. Tsubaki said it with a proud grin, arms crossed. Well, I expected nothing less from you. Judas replied, a light smile tugging at his lips. Oh? She raised a brow. Are you complimenting me to try and lower the fee? Well, if you want to believe that, then sure. Judas answered casually as he threw a few practiced swings, the air trembling faintly with each movement. Tsubaki narrowed one eye, analyzing him in silence. He's strong. The power behind his fist was far beyond what a level 3 should reasonably possess. Of course, in a real fight, an adventurer's status alone never told the full story. Skills, magic, and experience weighed just as heavily in determining overall combat ability. Even so, she could tell. Even without using magic, Judas wouldn't lose to a level 4 in terms of raw physical strength alone. That was what her instincts, and her experience as a veteran level 5, were telling her. Interesting. The corners of her lips slowly curled upward. Hey! Tsubaki called out to him. Would you like to sign a contract with me? Judas paused and turned his head toward her. A contract? You mean, a personal smith contract? Tsubaki answered with a single nod. Judas blinked a few times, then fell silent as he considered it. A personal smith contract. I've heard of this before. Isn't this the same kind of contract Bell and Welf signed in the original story? A personal smith contract was exactly what it sounded like. An agreement between an adventurer and a blacksmith. For the adventurer, it meant having a dedicated smith, someone who would maintain, repair, and eventually forge weapons tailored specifically to their growth and fighting style. For the blacksmith, it meant prioritizing that adventurer above all others, staking their time, reputation, and craftsmanship on their contracted adventurer. You're serious? Judas asked, his tone losing its earlier levity. Tsubaki nodded once, arms crossed beneath her chest, her usual teasing grin replaced by something far more earnest. I don't offer that lightly. A personal smith contract isn't just business. It's trust. I watch you grow, and you carry my work into battle. If you die because of a flaw in my craftsmanship, that stain is mine to bear. She looked straight at him. And if you become a legend, then my weapons become legends with you. Judas exhaled quietly. He understood now. This wasn't a casual offer. Tsubaki was choosing to invest in him. Don't you already have personal contracts with other adventurers? He asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Huh? Of course I do. Tsubaki replied without hesitation. But it's not like I'm only allowed to have one, you know? That was enough. Judas didn't need much more time to think. All right. There's no reason for me to reject the greatest mortal blacksmith in the entire world. The woman standing before him was the captain of the most prominent smithing familia in the City of Heroes. Turning down an offer like that would be nothing short of stupidity. At his words, Tsubaki felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Mortal blacksmith? She repeated flatly. I get that I'm no match for my goddess, but do you really have to point that out? Tsubaki let out a snort, then burst into a hearty laugh that echoed through the workshop. Ha! You've got guts, kid. She shook her head, amusement clear on her face, before fixing him with a sharp, appraising look. I'll take it as a compliment. Judas gave a small shrug. Tsubaki stepped closer and extended a hand, not playful this time, but firm and deliberate. Then it's settled. From today onward, I'm your contracted smith. Maintenance, repairs, adjustments, and when the time comes. A weapon worthy for someone like you. Judas looked at her hand for a brief moment before clasping it. I'll be counting on you, then. Their handshake was solid, sealing the agreement without ceremony. Chapter 188, The Throne Room. Several days had passed. It took that long to dive from the surface all the way down to the entry point of the deep floors. With Finn and the others' permission, Ace and Judas pushed forward without pause, cutting through the dungeon with relentless momentum, never lingering longer than necessary and remaining constantly alert for any sign of danger. As per the guild's classification, the 25th to the 36th floors were known as the lower floors. From the 37th floor onward, however, lay a far more dangerous domain, the deep floors. The moment he stepped into an area where most adventurers would never dare set foot, Judas felt a distinct shift in the atmosphere. It's eerie. This is definitely different from anything I've seen so far. Judas kept running, his senses sharp. The 37th floor was known as the White Palace, its walls, ground, and ceiling all colored in unnatural white, forming a vast labyrinth that stretched endlessly in every direction. This floor existed on a completely different scale compared to those above it. The distances between hallways, rooms, and walls were immense, making everything feel oppressively vast. Judas, don't let your guard down for even 1 second. A stern, mature voice reached his ears. Judas turned his head slightly and nodded toward the green-haired high elf trailing behind him. Accompanying them was Riveria, forming a 3-person group, the same composition they had used the last time they reached the 18th floor. Although, with their abilities, Ace and Judas would have been fine on their own. However, due to the recent attack involving the remnants of Evolus, and Judas' near lack of experience when it came to tackling the deep floors, Finn had assigned Riveria to accompany them. Riveria recalled the conversation she had shared with Finn. "It's not that I don't trust them," Finn had said, his voice calm but firm. "But a little precaution won't hurt, and I doubt either of them would object." He smiled faintly, fingers steepled in thought. "Besides, this will be good experience for Judas. The deep floors aren't something one can learn about from reports alone. In that sense, it's a win-win." Standing across from him, Riveria listened in silence. "Additionally, the three of you already have prior experience operating as a team. I'm counting on you to keep an eye on them, Riveria," Finn added. She gave a measured nod in response. "I will. I won't allow any accidents to occur," she said with quiet conviction. After a brief pause, Riveria shifted the topic. "On another note, I never thought I'd see the day Ace asked for permission instead of storming into the dungeon on her own." The disbelief in her eyes hadn't quite faded. Finn chuckled softly, but Riveria's expression remained thoughtful. "I was concerned after the incident with Rivas. Ace seemed unsettled. Depressed, even." She folded her arms. "But now, it feels as though something has eased her heart." Though Ace's hunger for strength remained unchanged, Riveria could clearly sense the difference. She's no longer throwing herself forward without regard for her own safety. Riveria continued. "And lately." A faint smile touched her lips. I've seen her smile more. When Riveria's thoughts returned to reality, her gaze drifted toward the black-haired boy at the front. "It must be because of him." A satisfied smile slowly formed on Riveria's lips. It was then that the dungeon walls around them cracked, spiderweb-like fractures spreading outward as monsters burst forth with shrill screeches. Their hollow eyes burned with bloodlust and hostility as they fixed their gaze on the trio. "Is that a horde of skull sheeps?" Judas narrowed his eyes. They were monsters he had only read about before. Each stood roughly 140 centimeters tall, sheep-like monsters made entirely of bone. A large, dark-colored strip of skin draped over their bodies, starting from the back of their skull-like heads. They were also capable of firing piles, compressed, bone-like projectiles, at their enemies. When Judas studied them more closely, he realized that to the naked eye, they appeared almost like floating skulls suspended in empty space. Their skin naturally camouflaged them against the environment of the 37th floor, making them difficult to spot until they moved. Seeing the monsters, Ace instinctively reached for the hilt of her sword, only to be stopped by Judas. Their three-person formation was clear: Judas at the front, Ace in the middle, and Riveria at the rear. "Just like what we agreed earlier." Judas spoke calmly, eyes locked on the approaching horde. "Riveria and I will handle any monsters that get in our way. Ace, you conserve your energy. You will need to face Eudias at full strength." At his words, Ace hesitated for only a moment before nodding and stepping back. "Each of them is at least level 3. Maybe even level 4. And there are more than 20 of them." Judas assessed their strength in an instant. Raising his hand, he summoned a crimson magic circle beneath his feet as magic power surged violently around him. The skull sheeps reacted immediately. Several of them opened their jaws before firing compressed bone projectiles that screamed through the air. Judas stepped forward, completely unfazed by the incoming attacks. Infernal barrage. Waves of roaring flames burst forth, completely illuminating the area as the incoming projectiles were swallowed whole and incinerated in an instant. Grr! The skull sheeps let out distorted growls before their figures vanished within the inferno. With the ground scorched and the air shimmering from the heat, Judas remained still, waiting for the smoke to clear. "Oh! What a surprise!" he muttered softly. Although most of the monsters had been reduced to ash, several figures remained in the distance, having survived by retreating at the last moment and using the charred remains of their fallen kin as shields. The ones at the back sensed the danger, retreated in time, and even used the others as neat shields. So it's true. Monsters on the deep floors are more intelligent than those above. Judas exhaled quietly as he watched the survivors turn and flee. After witnessing that display of power, they understood, the adventurer standing before them was far beyond what they could handle. You won't be that lucky this time. Judas raised a finger and pointed toward their retreating forms. Wind Blade. Several translucent magic circles materialized around him before shooting into the air, razor-sharp currents slicing through the monsters before they could even react. Their bodies split apart mid-stride, crumbling into ash before they hit the ground. As the last remains scattered, Judas turned his head. Behind him, Riveria was already dealing with another threat, a group of elite lizardmen that had emerged from the rear. Spinning her staff with effortless precision, she didn't even bother using magic. A single, crushing strike to each head was enough. The monsters burst apart like shattered watermelons. Their eyes met. With a silent nod exchanged, they continued their march forward. After navigating the vast corridors of the 37th floor and cutting down any monsters that dared bar their path, they finally reached the center. The entrance to the 38th floor lay here, the domain of the monster Rex. Eudias. So this is it. The throne room. Judas muttered as he surveyed the open expanse before turning his gaze toward Ace. Chapter 189, The Sword Princess vs. Eudias Part 1. An eerie silence fell over the area. The three chose not to speak, instead focusing their attention on their hearing, listening for any abnormalities. Patiently, they waited, mentally preparing themselves for the appearance of the first boss monster of the deep floors. The spawn interval of Eudos is about 3 months. And the last ones to have slain it were the Loki Familia. Glancing briefly at Ace and Riveria, both of whom remained alert, Judas crossed his arms and closed his eyes. A sonar-like wave erupted from his feet and propagated through the ground beneath them. He could feel it, a vast amount of energy gathering as the malice of the dungeon was directed toward them. When he opened his eyes again, he spoke without turning to look at Ace. It's coming. Ace nodded and swiftly unsheathed her sword, rushing toward the center. As if on cue, the walls and floor began to tremble. Dust and small fragments of rock fell from the ceiling as a low screech echoed throughout the chamber. Guys, once again, I'm sorry for being selfish. Ace's voice was steady as she lowered her stance, the hilt of her sword held firmly in her hand. But I want to do this alone. Judas gave a small nod in understanding, while Riveria let out a weary sigh. You've been giving me headaches ever since you were a child. But since we agreed to this beforehand, I won't argue. Even as she spoke, deep fractures spread across the ground, spider-webbing outward. Then, the earth violently bulged upward. A massive clump of stone was forced out of the floor, and from within it, enormous skeletal hands burst forth, tearing through the earth as if ripping free from a cocoon. To announce its arrival, the monster unleashed a deafening roar that shook the chamber to its core. Golden eyes and hollow sockets locked onto one another. Judas narrowed his eyelids, analyzing Eudias in his mind. A towering black skeletal frame, nearly 10 meters tall, its lower body absent as if it had been fused into the ground. The sheer pressure radiating from it made its power unmistakable. Level 6, at the very least. Its presence alone was enough to crush the will of most adventurers, instilling terror and despair before a single blow was struck. Yet the people standing here neither flinched nor retreated. Judas shifted his gaze between Ace and the floor boss. Considering the vast difference in size, any onlooker would have thought the girl's actions suicidal. Still, neither he nor Riveria moved. They remained silent, watching as everything unfolded. I can't boost her with my magic. Doing so would only cheapen her achievement. He glanced at Riveria. For the briefest moment, concern flickered across her elegant features, not towards the monster, but for Ace. Then it vanished. Her expression returned to complete composure, calm and resolute as ever. I don't know the specifics of Ace's status, but ever since Judas appeared, the rate of her improvement has clearly accelerated. Just from observing her movements. Riveria thought as she watched Ace charge forward. For her to challenge Yudo's right now means her stats must have already reached their limit, long since qualifying for a level up. To gain greater strength and reach the milestone that is level 6. She must accomplish a feat worthy of that rank, an achievement that even the gods would acknowledge. That was why Riveria had allowed Ace to face such danger alone. Without accepting risk, no matter how hard an adventurer trained, their level would never rise. Not everyone could remain fearless in the face of death for the sake of strength. Most adventurers treated their profession as nothing more than a means to earn money and live comfortably. That was why nearly half of Orario's adventurers remained at level 1 for the rest of their lives. It has begun. Judas and Riveria watched as Yudos initiated the first strike. Its massive skeletal arms sweeping horizontally toward Ace. Ace dodged by leaping upward, soaring more than a dozen meters into the air as the attack struck nothing but empty space. Yudos lifted its head, the two locking eyes. Before the monster could retract its arm, Ace landed atop it and surged forward in a burst of speed. She adjusted her grip, her gaze fixed on the magic stone hidden behind its ribcage. Her wrist blurred as she brought her sword down. A dull, heavy sound echoed as the force rebounded violently into her arm. Ace narrowed her eyes. The slash had barely chipped Yudo's defenses, more a shallow scratch than real damage. Then, a massive shadow fell over her. Move! She retreated instantly as Yudo slammed both of its elongated arms downward. Jumping back dozens of meters, Ace landed cleanly on her feet, re-establishing her stance. I can't reach its magic stone, let alone damage its bones with my sword alone. The thought had barely formed when she heard the ground beneath her feet creak. Her instincts screamed. Ace leapt into the air just as a massive spike of bone erupted from below. The lances of Yudos. One of Yudo's defining traits was its ability to channel attacks through the ground itself, striking from below without warning. Ace didn't even need to look back to know that a trail of black spikes had erupted from the ground, relentlessly pursuing her with every step. When she turned her head and met Yudo's gaze once more, a sharp glint of challenge flashed in her eyes as she made a silent declaration. I will win. The Sword Princess roared those words within her heart. Meanwhile, deep within the middle floors of the dungeon, a pair of white-haired women walked through the winding corridor, one wearing a calm, unshaken expression, while the other bore a tense yet focused look. Naturally, it was the aunt-and-niece duo. Althea and Belle Cranel. Belle, are you prepared? Althea asked as she continued forward, not bothering to turn back. Belle didn't mind. She simply nodded. Yes. After all the training you put me through over the years, I've never been more ready than I am now. Her voice carried firm conviction, even as she worked to suppress the fear tightening her chest. Althea stopped for a brief moment before giving a small nod. Good, she said. Because I have no intention of making this easy for you. She raised two fingers to her mouth and let out a sharp whistle. The piercing sound echoed through the corridor. Belle's hand immediately closed around the hilt of the Hestia knife as she sensed something approaching. Heavy footsteps reverberated through the passageway. From the shadows, a menacing presence emerged. Its glowing red eyes locking onto her the instant it appeared. Chapter 190, The Sword Princess vs. Eudias Part 2. This is the trial I prepared for you. A minotaur I've been training for the past week. Althea's voice was quiet, almost indifferent, as she sat atop a nearby rock. With every step the monster took, Belle felt the vibrations ripple through the ground beneath her feet, each tremor drawing closer. Don't mistake this minotaur for the ones you've defeated before. Althea continued, her tone never changing. This trial won't end until you defeat it. I don't care if it takes days, weeks, or even months. A bead of sweat slid down Belle's cheek and dripped onto the stone floor below. At last, the minotaur emerged from the shadows. Its crimson eyes never once left Belle as it exhaled heavily through its nostrils, hot steam bursting forth with each breath. After a week of Althea's brutal training, it was noticeably different, its movements sharper, its presence heavier, radiating far more danger than any minotaur Belle had faced before. By my estimation. Althea said casually. It possesses combat power equivalent to a level 3. Level 3? Belle's voice cracked as the words spilled out. Are you serious? That's 2 whole levels above me. Her throat tightened as she swallowed. This is way too hard. How am I supposed to win something like that? She turned to look at her aunt, desperation creeping into her eyes. Belle knew Althea never made things easy, but this wasn't just difficult. Facing an opponent with such an overwhelming gap in strength was no different from a death sentence. This is going too far. She clenched her teeth. I've beaten stronger opponents before. The trio of minotaurs. The plant monster during the monster feria. But those were normal minotaurs. And I only defeated that plant monster because I had help. Does she really expect me to keep pulling off miracle after miracle? Althea gave no reply. She didn't even look at Belle. Her silence, and the flat expression that plainly said deal with it, was answer enough. Seeing that, Belle let out a long, resigned sigh. She already knew her aunt's personality well enough. The Minotaur stepped forward and released a savage roar before charging, its massive body surging ahead with terrifying force. Looks like I don't have a choice. A hero, no matter how impossible the odds, always finds a way to prevail. Belle forced her breathing to steady, recalling the heroes from the stories she loved so dearly. Her fear settled, replaced by resolve. Sword in one hand, Hestia knife in the other. She lowered her stance, eyes locked onto the oncoming monster. Because she knew. Her time in hell had just begun. Back on the 37th floor, the battle raged on. Judas could feel the ground trembling as the clash between Ace and Udo's intensified. Black bone spikes erupted relentlessly from the ground wherever Ace stepped, tearing through the floor in violent bursts. Thankfully, her footwork was flawless. She weaved between them with ease, never breaking her momentum as she closed the distance toward the floor boss. Sensing the threat of her approach, Udo's seemed to frown, slamming both of its massive hands into the ground. The earth ruptured once more, but this time skeletal figures clawed their way out from below, locking their hollow, hostile gazes onto Ace. Those are Spartoi. Judas recognized them instantly. Skeleton-type monsters with strength around level 4. They could spawn wielding a variety of weapons, and more importantly, they knew how to use them. Among the monsters native to the 37th floor, they ranked among the strongest. Judas quickly assessed the situation. Over 100 of them. Just that army alone would be enough to wipe out more than half of the familiars currently active in Orario. I'm surrounded. Ace realized it at once, her expression tightening, but she didn't hesitate. Tempest. A violent emerald wind exploded around her body, roaring like a living storm. She raised her sword, ready to swing and erase everything in her path. Only for several beams of light to flash past her. The air screamed. The Spartoi were engulfed in an instant. When the dust settled, the skeletal army was gone, reduced to scattered legs and shattered remains, their upper bodies completely vaporized. Ace blinked, momentarily stunned, before turning her head. Judas stood with one finger extended, multiple magic circles hovering calmly around him. Nearby, Riveria spun her staff and crushed the skulls of the few Spartoi that had spawned closer to her, each strike decisive and effortless. We'll handle the Spartoi, Judas said evenly. Focus on Udo's. Ace nodded without hesitation. Whoosh! Instinct screamed. She twisted away just in time as a massive skeletal fist crashed down where she had stood moments earlier, the impact sending rock and debris flying. With the Spartoi taken care of, Ace redirected her full attention to the floor boss. She crouched low, muscles coiling tight like steel springs. Then she launched herself forward. The ground shattered beneath her feet as she accelerated. An all-out charge focused on speed and raw attack power. Tempest. With her blade and figure wrapped in aerial, Ace struck downward in a single, decisive arc. The emerald winds screamed. Udo's arm was severed cleanly at the joint, crashing to the ground several meters away with a thunderous thud. For a brief moment, even Judas and Riveria halted their movements to witness the scene. Amazing! Riveria murmured under her breath. Eudos was a monster wreck she had only ever defeated through coordinated teamwork. The fact that Ace was challenging it alone was impressive enough, but to cripple it like this. She cut off its arm. Riveria couldn't deny it. What Ace had just accomplished was something that would be difficult even for her. The wounded Eudos let out a furious scream, its malice surging as clusters of bone spikes erupted toward Ace. She twisted her body mid-step, narrowly avoiding the piercing assault before leaping backward and landing in a safer area. I couldn't follow through completely. Ace tightened her grip on her sword. But for now, Eudos should be weakened. Ace tightened her grip on her sword. Just as she was about to launch another attack, the sight before her forced her to halt mid-step. To the side of Eudos, the ground split apart as a massive spike erupted upward. Its form gradually taking shape until it unmistakably resembled a sword. Eudos has a sword? A flicker of disbelief crossed Ace's eyes. I've never seen anything like this before. Throughout the entire history of the dungeon, only a handful of individuals had been reckless enough to challenge a monster Rex alone. Even the Loki Familia, despite their countless expeditions, had only ever defeated Eudos as a group. Because of that, a hidden condition had gone undiscovered. When faced by a single opponent, Eudos would manifest a colossal black sword. The giant skeletal monster wrapped its hand around the hilt as the blade tore free from the ground, then swung it toward her without hesitation. Just one swing was enough to completely overturn the tide of battle. If I don't avoid that, I'll die. For the first time since the fight began, Ace Wallenstein felt the breath of death wash over her. That wraps up this part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.